Well, it is Wednesday morning, kind of a different beat than our usual Thursday morning hookups, but nonetheless, we are about to launch into The Miracle Within, episode 122, and we'll be picking up where we bombed out last week in episode 121. How are you this morning, Barrett?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. And even if we were just talking to ourselves, it was still a really enjoyable conversation.
That is true. It was something that we hopefully will be able to duplicate in this episode because there is a lot of good sharing that went on, and this gives me an opportunity to mention the new website, The Miracle Within, all one word, .org. And if you haven't checked it out, please do, because we've got a lot of resources there and a nice, easy format so that you can get an overview of what A Course in Miracles actually really is all about.
Yeah, you've done a really great job with this website, and I'm enjoying actually reading it and learning a few things that I hadn't read before or considered in quite that way. So I think it's a really good resource both for new people to the course, but also people who've been studying it for a bit. I think you'll probably discover some new connections, and the resources page on it has a tremendous list of all kinds of great teachers of the course. And yeah, I think it's going to be a real kind of gathering place or central hub for a lot of Course in Miracles activity.
Yes, and I still have to put up an events page, but hopefully eventually we'll have highlights of different events going on around the country and around the world, because I know that we've got one event going on in October down in the Carolinas, and at the same time we've got another event going on in Ibania, so that little rock out in the ocean near Gibraltar. So
I don't even know what that one is, but that sounds cool.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a really great event. It's got some great teachers showing up for it, and October in the Mediterranean, especially off the coast of Spain, is going to be a really perfect setting to just go and decompress and share the amazing imagery and vision of A Course in Miracles. So, but we will be getting that up and running before long, so that you'll have opportunities to go find events that can support your own journey through A Course in Miracles.
And since we're talking about upcoming events, there is an upcoming event that both you and I are participating in. This is Sunday, November 5th. It's going to be here in the Chicago area. It looks like in Glenview. And I decided it looks like we're going to be calling it Exploring the Course. And the subtitle is An Afternoon of A Course in Miracles. So I'm going to be sharing, you're going to be sharing, my friend Charlie Roberts, who I've done a lot of presentations with, is going to be a part of our crew, and Dave Burr, who's another local Course in Miracles teacher, at least the four of us, and we'll kind of let you know what else is going to be popping, but we're going to be talking about the course and answering questions and just having a good time together. So you can kind of put that in your calendar for Sunday, November 5th at 1 p.m. in Glenview. Probably be about 4.5 hours long. So we'll get more details out about that as soon as we get them all settled. So
yes, and that is going to be a great opportunity for the whole tri-state region, because people down in northern Indiana or in southern Wisconsin are definitely encouraged to take a drive on that day. Nice day to get out and run around, and before winter really gets aggressive, and join us in A Course in Miracles. And I myself will be wearing a toga and be trying to dress as much like Jesus as possible. So you don't want to miss that.
That's right. Hey, we don't have to be Jim Belushi to have a toga party. So
it's true. And, it's kind of a toga and espresso kind of day. So
I have no idea what that means, but it sounds pretty interesting.
I'm just babbling at this point. So every once in a while, I have to let instead of the cat out of the bag, I let the ego out of the bag, and it gets really weird.
Well, I've always thought it would be kind of good to have a flip-top head, so when your brain needs a little tinkering, you can just kind of, put the loose screws back in.
Yes, and I do have a lot of loose screws, but that is something I've cultivated for decades, so it is a work in progress.
All right. Well, maybe we'll loosen up a few more screws today as we talk about the course.
Yeah, and this is a pretty juicy section. We bombed out in the last video we made partway through this section on forgiveness to destroy from the Song of Prayer. And this next paragraph is, it kind of curls your hair when you stop and think about how, we do these things and we never really admit it to ourselves. And then all of a sudden when it's brought up so that we have to examine it, it's like, damn, do I do that? So.
Yeah. Well, why don't we just share it? Because as you mentioned, Jesus basically telling us how not to forgive. How we probably do already, but maybe we should look at this and realize it's not what we want. So he says, in this group, first, there are the forms in which a better person deigns to stoop to save a baser one from what he truly is. Forgiveness here rests on an attitude of gracious lordliness so far from love that arrogance could never be dislodged. Who can forgive and yet despise? And who can tell another he is steeped in sin and yet perceive him as the Son of God? Who makes a slave to teach what freedom is? There is no union here, but only grief. This is not really mercy. This is death. So, like you said, he's not really holding any punches back here. He's letting us know that whenever we are kind of using this form of forgiveness, right? The form of forgiveness that says, "Oh, you're this awful, miserable wretch," but because I'm a holy person, I'm gonna forgive you. It's not really kind, and really everything that's not kindness, as Jesus says here, is death. Right? So there's only two thought systems, and Jesus is pointing this out. What is not love and kindness is actually separation, and when separation is death. So which thought system are we going to pick? Are we picking love or are we picking fear? That's our choice in this moment and always. And Jesus is very consistent on this all throughout the whole course. We get to decide, but he wants us to be very clear about the decision that we're making.
Yeah, piety is definitely one of the great pitfalls, and right now in these current times, we're seeing it everywhere. It is reflected all around us, where this rhetoric around, I will pray for you in that kind of a lofty, smug voice, really, punches a lot of people's buttons. So we've got different groups out there who are running around telling everybody, look at what a lowly, sinning slob you are. But don't worry, because from this higher elevated position, I can intercede. And I think that's really the scariest part of all of this, is that the ego likes to give us that internal dialogue about how we are so much closer to God that we can intercede on the behalf of those hideous sinners out there that are just screwing up the world for all of us.
Yeah, well, I guess maybe I should stop saying that to you then, huh? That I'm going to pray for you.
Well, your little offering, your little contribution is actually done sincerely, but
Oh, okay.
it's not done to reinforce Barrett. It's done to reinforce Jesus, and that's where we need to be coming from. Are we becoming the voice of Jesus, the voice of the Holy Spirit, or are we becoming the voice of the ego and just covering everything with that smarmy kind of peanut butter that is sticky and really doesn't taste all that good?
Yeah, I usually like peanut butter, but I don't think I would like that one. So, yeah, and you make a really good point, that there is a loving form of prayer, but it almost never involves someone literally saying, well, I'll pray for you then, because you're awful.
Yes. That's the easiest way, really, to piss off people, is to come up with that kind of a lie and then leave the room. It's bad enough you said it, but then when you just walk away, it really drives the point home that there is a vast chasm between you and the other person, and the whole point of that is to remove the chasm, not to dig a deeper trench.
Yeah. Yeah, ultimately this is always about undoing the separation and not about reinforcing it. And so we can see how these different forms of forgiveness to destroy, they always reinforce the separation, right? In some way they're making us separate from each other or separate from God. As long as there's some sort of separation, then the ego is going to be okay, right?
Yes, the ego is definitely very self-reinforcing and ingratiating, and generally pretty sly too. So you do have to monitor what the hell is going on inside your mind, and hopefully nothing's going on inside your mind, because that's the state where you attain your serenity and extend that serenity to those around you. Anyway, going on with paragraph 3, it says, another form, still very like the first if it is understood, does not appear in quite such blatant arrogance. The one who would forgive the other does not claim to be the better. Now he says instead that here is one whose sinfulness he shares, since both have been unworthy and deserve the retribution of the wrath of God. So instead of going above people, you get down into the mud hole with them and make everything pretty muddy. This can appear to be a humble thought, and may indeed induce a rivalry in sinfulness and guilt. That's kind of scary. It is not love for God's creation and the holiness that is his gift forever. Can his son condemn himself and still remember him? And that really spikes for me the idea of grandeur versus grandiosity, because that idea of grandiosity does tend to move in that direction of trying to drag us down into the thoughts of sin and error that the ego is trying to make real. And it is really a very blatant attack on God, because we are the expression of God. One of the things that I reinforce every once in a while when I see people getting a little bit too crazy running around saying, I am God, is no, you are not God. God is expressing itself as you, and there is a difference. So, you have to step outside the ego. You have to get away from that grandiosity and humble yourself, and then allow the thoughts, the ideas, the vision to come through you. So, paralleling yourself with the darker side of our existence in this realm is not helping God or God's cause.
Yeah, there's sort of this fine line where we don't want to hide the ego or the ego thoughts. We don't want to pretend they're not there, but we also don't want to identify with them, right? We don't want to believe that that's the truth of what we are. And this thought, this sort of second form of forgiveness to destroy, is all about debasing ourselves, right? Saying that we're all sinners together. Again, as we were just saying, this is another form of separation, because this is a belief that we are separate from God. Maybe we're all down in the mud together, but God is high and above us. And as we learn in different parts of the Course, as we see our brother, so we see ourselves. But then he also says, and as you see your brother, so is God to you. So if we believe our brother is a sinner, on some unconscious level, we're also believing that God is a sinner, that God is vengeful or wrathful. And what is the Course teaching us but that all those ideas of a vengeful creator are false, and that God is actually love, and we don't have anything to fear. So again, we're really just kind of exploring a lot of these ways that the ego uses spiritual ideas, such as forgiveness, but they're really not so kind and loving. And so again, as we shine the flashlight on them, it helps us to kind of avoid the pitfalls ourselves, so we don't get so stuck in them.
Right. And it's interesting to watch how insidious the ego is, because that it becomes a dance of subtleties where we can actually slide off the ledge and not realize that we have done so. A lot of the work that Mother Teresa did, as lofty as her vision was, some of the rhetoric that she offered us did go in that direction of, I am a miserable, sinning nothing, and I should be on my hands and knees at all time. And we find that with a lot of different, highly appreciated and very visible luminaries in the world of spirituality. So we have to be discerning in, being able to look at these people and acknowledge the love and the beauty of their life journey, but at the same time not get caught up in rhetoric that is debasing for us and for humanity in general.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I like that point about discernment, because that's really what we are doing as we progress spiritually. We're becoming more and more discerning, right? And what is the ultimate discernment that we're making is between truth, between reflections of truth in this world, and reflections of the ego. And we get better and better at kind of deciding what it is that we want, and being more and more clear and willing to choose, for that truth. So like you said, we can choose the love that Mother Teresa expressed without buying into her particular theology. Maybe it worked for her, which is great, but again, I think that the Course is like a gentler path, and it gives us a God that is worthy of being loved, because that's the true God. The true God is worthy of being loved. He's not a vengeful, dictator, ruthless and punishing. And these ideas are all reflections of what we think God is in the mind, our fear of God, right? Which is the last obstacle to the peace of God. But they're not really the truth. So we can see these things but not buy into them. And we don't really, they're kind of like water off a duck's back. They might come up, but they don't really stick to us. And that's where we want to be.
Exactly, and that brought to mind some images around Jesus when he interceded with the woman who was accused of prostitution. And I don't think that it was ever actually determined that was in fact Mary Magdalene. I think that was a story that occurred in the Bible without specifically pointing it in the direction of Mary Magdalene, because Mary Magdalene, according to some biblical scholars, was in fact not a prostitute at all. She was a landholder and the head of a household. But nonetheless, when Jesus is addressing the woman that the crowd is getting ready to stone to death, he absolves her of all of those sins. And she's at his feet, begging mercy. And, he lifts her up. He doesn't say, well, you definitely screwed up there, and, you need to stay on your hands and knees for a while here to do penance. He immediately lifts her up and supports her and extends love to her. And I think that's really a beautiful story in relationship to what we're looking at this particular part of the Psalm prayer.
Yeah, yeah. And just to kind of bounce off of some of those ideas before, according to Gary Renard and his teachers, Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene, and that makes sense to me. So they definitely say she was not a prostitute, that she was actually as enlightened as Jesus was, and she was a teacher in her own right. And there are even teachings of Mary that I'm not as familiar with, but I've heard people say they're very beautiful teachings of spirit and spirituality. So, yeah, but I think that story of Jesus forgiving the prostitute, and the very famous line he said, "He who is without sin, let him cast the first stone," was a really great and beautiful way of, in that case, they were trying to kind of trap Jesus as well as the prostitute, because it was illegal at that time to speak out against the law. And so they were trying to trap Jesus by telling him, "Oh yeah, we're supposed to stone this person, right? That's what the law is." But he didn't speak out against the law. He found the way kind of through the situation without attacking anyone involved in the situation, and it totally resolved perfectly. So it's an example of how spirit can work, I think, in situations that might not seem to have an answer or a clear path through them, that a way may exist that all of a sudden will just arise and come forward.
Exactly. And it's interesting you mentioned the fact that Jesus spoke out against around the tenets of the law, the tenets of Judaism, because there's a very interesting kind of thread of subtlety going on in the story. When they corner Jesus and ask him, he does not speak out against the law.
Right.
But he goes down and he writes his response in the dust.
Oh.
Now, on that particular day, the Sabbath, which is when this happened, if it was one of the tenets of the law that you cannot write permanent writing, like ink on parchment or whatever. Wow. So if you write, it has to be impermanent. Oh. And Jesus writing in the dust, his response, and then getting rid of it, was a beautiful example of what a true scholar and master he was of Judaism. And, and he said, "I have not come here to uphold the law. I have come here to bring the law to a conclusion. I have come to finalize the law."
Yeah. I mean, the way Jesus gets portrayed nowadays, it almost seems like he was they talk about him as the first Christian. Well, Jesus wasn't a Christian. He was a rabbi. He was a Jew. And so I think just a lot of perceptions and conceptions that people have about him are wrong or incorrect. They've been perpetuated throughout the years. And I think one of the main purposes of the course is actually to help correct a lot of the mistaken ideas that were built up in the church around him, the theology that was created by the church, about him, rather than what he was actually saying and trying to demonstrate with his life.
Exactly. At that era, there were Buddhist missionaries, which is kind of a bizarre thing because Buddhism really doesn't send out missionaries. But the Asoka school in southern India of Buddhism had sent out missionaries about 50 years before the advent of Jesus. So we had Buddhist monks at the great schools in Alexandria and in Greece and in Rome and Italy and Israel and Syria. So there were Buddhists who were undoubtedly having dialogue with Jesus, because he was very aggressive about learning and understanding. So we can see where some of the threads of Buddhist philosophy shows up in a lot of the dialogue that we get from Jesus. And that is a huge break from, from the normal activities of a rabbi. And so I also envision Jesus as being a Buddhist rabbi, which is kind of a nice little variation there on that. And I envision myself as being a Native American rabbi. So how about that?
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I feel like I'm in good company here.
Absolutely. So you want to jump into that next paragraph?
Yeah. So Jesus says here the goal is to separate from God the Son he loves and keep him from his source. So again, we're talking about the idea that we're all miserable sinners together. This goal is also sought by those who seek the role of martyr at another's hand. Here must the aim be clearly seen, for this may pass as meekness and as charity instead of cruelty. Is it not kind to be accepting of another's spite, and not respond except with silence and a gentle smile? Behold how good are you who bear with patience and with saintliness the anger and the hurt another gives, and do not show the bitter pain you feel. So, he's really talking here about the mask of kindness. And a lot of people may be pretty good at wearing the mask of kindness, but if the kindness is covering over hatred and anger and all these other ego thoughts, it's meaningless, right? An illusion of kindness is nothing. What we really want is true kindness from the heart, kindness that it doesn't. It's not really concerned with the images of the world. It's concerned with really being there for another person, or being truly kind and compassionate, not having a personal agenda even around connecting with someone, and just really being there with them. So it's not an easy thing to do, but this is what Jesus is asking of us. And the way to do this is to acknowledge all of the unkindnesses, right? All of the ways that we have our own agenda, all of the ways that we want what we want, everyone else be damned. We acknowledge these things and we start to release them. And that's what the forgiveness process helps us to do, is to let go of all these false things, so that what is true within us, this real kindness, can actually just come forward and be expressed and seen.
And that is a real challenge for all of us, to be present in the moment. If we are 100% here, if we're not looking at the past and basing our kindness on being able to overlook other people's insubordination and insurrection and insecurity, and if we're not anticipating the future, where we're thinking, look how gracious I'm going to appear to be, and get all puffed up around that. If we're present in the moment, authentic and transparent, then all of a sudden we have arrived at that place where there is the true level of forgiveness and acceptance, and being able to look at the situation and realize this never really happened. This is all part of this delusion that I created. And that makes it a lot easier, I think, to be forgiving about all the roles that you have ascribed to people. Because, the dialogue, the script for this movie that we're engaged in came from you. And so whenever somebody shows up and walks across your feet and mangles your toes, that was something that you put in place so that you could prove to yourself that you were not God in expression, that you had fallen from grace.
Yeah, it's this massive illusion massive delusion too, as you just said, that we pull over, we perpetuate on ourselves. I think I like this image of like pulling the wool over our eyes, right? That we're literally pulling the wool over our eyes. And what is the wool? The wool is actually this experience of the physical world. Like, we think that this world is actually happening, and it seems very convincing, right? Our experiences here seem very real. Well, the reason they seem so real is because we want them to seem real. We want to be fooled by this wool that we're pulling over our eyes. And it's not that we are going to disappear in a puff of smoke when we wake up. We can still appear to be here in the world, but a part of us knows it's just not true. And just like if we were having a dream in our sleep in bed or at night, just like a lucid dream that we were aware of, that dream would not be upsetting. Once you're aware that you're dreaming, that monster who's trying to kind of get you, all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, whatever, it's not actually real. And usually the monster disappears or turns into something, cute and fluffy or whatever at that point. And similarly, in this waking dream that we have, when we realize that it's not what's real, our whole experience of it is less and less frightening. We can go through even the most quote unquote terrifying things with this sense of grace and love. We know that we can't really be touched. Even if our body is hurt or even killed, the truth of what we are, it cannot be touched. We cannot lose that connection with the divine. And that's the state that Jesus was in at the end of his life. And it's why his experience of the crucifixion was painless. He did not suffer on the cross. That is a lie that the church put on him. But his experience was just one of love and kindness. And that's his whole message throughout the whole course. And it's available to all of us whenever we're ready for it. So I'm really feeling grateful that this message has come into the world and that I'm able to partake in it, because I don't know, I feel very grateful for that.
Absolutely. I think it definitely is very humbling, the fact that, Spirit is always ready to express itself through us. And that's something that the Course reinforces over and over again throughout all of its dialogue, is that, all you need to do is just let go and allow the Holy Spirit to do what it wants to do or needs to do. And then you become a very powerful force in the delusional world of pain and suffering.
Well, actually, that reminds me of a joke I should probably share. So there was a guy that was climbing a tree when all of a sudden he slipped and he grabbed a branch that was hanging on the way down. After an hour or so had passed, he was still hanging there and he was starting to get exhausted. So he looked up to the sky and he cried out, "God, help me, please help me." All of a sudden the clouds parted and a voice boomed out from on high. "Let go," said the voice. The guy paused and he looked up at the sky once again and he said, "Is there anyone else up there?"
Oh, interesting. Yes, that is a pitfall. We hear the answer, but we're always in doubt of it, or we frequently are in doubt of it. And then we're like a fresh apple that takes that fatal plunge.
Yeah. So sometimes we're being asked to let go. We're not so sure, but when we get some clear guidance, usually there's more to the picture than what we can see. It kind of reminds me of that scene in the Indiana Jones movie where he's at this big canyon that looks like it drops off into infinity below him. But the guidance is to take a massive step. So he does, right? He takes this big step and all of a sudden he lands on solid rock that he couldn't see because it was like this optical illusion. And a lot of times our life is like that. We need to take a step under what seems like, I don't know where my foot's going to land, but when Spirit is guiding us and telling us you will land safe, we can take that plunge not knowing how it's going to look. And often that's when the miracles occur, the kind of worldly miracles of things unexpected happening. And, I think all of these things can show up in our life when we're willing to kind of take that leap of faith.
Exactly. It's learning how to trust that the invisible bridge is right there. And that's what makes it so exciting, and that's what makes it so fun. So, it's defeating the fear, getting beyond the fear, arriving at a place where you're in that realm of non-physicality, knowing that you are not a body. You are, in fact, free. and you are always as God created you.
Yeah, well, and speaking of kind of taking a big step into an unknown future, in addition to the Miracle Within website that you've been working on and doing such a great job on, I've been actually called to start a school for A Course in Miracles. I'm calling it Miracles You, and I'm working on a website for that too. So there's all kinds of beautiful creative projects that are sort of in the works right now, and that's kind of how it feels. Like, I don't know exactly how this whole school is going to show up or come together, but I'm just saying yes. I'm taking it one step at a time, and being certain, even if I don't know where my foot is going, that it's going to land on something steady and solid. And so far, that's how it's happening.
Very nice. That's going to be quite exciting, and it's going to be an opportunity for people to develop a sense of intimacy with the course. I think whenever we are able to access teachers, whether it's in live events or on the web or whatever, there is a joining together, and that creates an intimate experience with truth, because truth is designed to be shared. So we're all looking forward to AICMU and its appearance before too much longer.
Yes, I'm sure I'll have more of an announcement once the site is up and running, and I'll be sharing more about it on our calls, and looking forward to that too.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we've kind of arrived at the limitation of our timeline here.
I think we're back where we ended last week when you and I were just talking to each other. So
it's kind of like Groundhog Day, and if you're not aware of the review that we did of Groundhog Day, definitely check out Finding Miracles at the Movies, because Barrett and I were joined by Devin, and the three of us took a look at Groundhog Day seen through the lens of A Course in Miracles.
Yeah, great movie, and it was a great conversation. Yeah, I learned a few things during the conversation too, and got some new insights into the movie. So I'm really glad we did that, and looking forward to many more of these movie talks. So
yes, the whole world actually is trying to help you awaken, and you see it in the movies a lot. So we will be doing a lot of things with our discussions, and I think the next thing we're going to do is the Truman Show, so that should be kind of fun.
Yeah, great movie. Jim Carrey, a great actor, pretty spiritual dude too. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, actually, Jim Carrey has been a Course in Miracles student for quite a few years now, and you're able to start seeing it in some of the videos that he's producing. So go on YouTube and check out some of Jim Carrey, not movies, but the videos that are going on with him discussing things about how to live life and what life really is all about.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds awesome. And I'm looking forward to our next call next week, Thursday. I know we've got another one of these, and we'll keep on going through all the false ways to forgive, so that we can not do those anymore.
Yes, we can be authentic and true to ourselves. Well, Barrett, it was great. I will see you in 7 days, if not earlier.
All right, look forward to it, man. You have a great one.
You too. Bye.
All right, bye, man.